So in this video, we're going to be talking about dyslexia and what are the signs of it. And what you're going to see is that the signs of dyslexia don't have anything to do with reversing letters or numbers. It's none of that stuff that you're seeing in the memes online. So let's get into what it really is. So when we think about dyslexia, just this is the big overall idea that it is a learning disability and it causes trouble with fluent and accurate word recognition. If you can't look at a word and know what it is right away, you're not going to be able to read it. They also have a hard time with spelling and with decoding. Spelling can be especially difficult because it's just a harder skill than reading anyway. And all of the trouble that people with dyslexia have with spelling and decoding means that they have pretty poor reading comprehension. When they're actually reading text, they spend less time reading and their vocabulary does not develop as quickly. And these things are caused by a deficit in phonological component of language. People with dyslexia have a hard time hearing sounds and hearing them in the right order and being able to take words apart and put them back together again. It's just really hard for them to sort of organize their brains around literacy. And dyslexia is also unexpected in relation to other abilities. So you might have a child who can understand a story that's read to them beautifully. They really can talk about it. They understand everything that went on in that story. But if they try to read a story on their own, they have no idea what's going on because their cognitive energy has not been used on comprehension. It has been used on just trying to figure out what these words are and struggling through that. And again, and I cannot emphasize this enough, dyslexia is not related to reversing letters or numbers. It's not anything that's happening visually with this disorder. When we're thinking about common symptoms of dyslexia, there are several that you can really look for, and you can look for these problems across age ranges, starting from maybe age 3 right the way through to adulthood. People with dyslexia have trouble with phonics. Sometimes they'll know the sounds. So if they see a letter B, they can say B. But if they see a B, an A, and a T, they can't say B, A, T. And then if they can say B, A, T, they're not able to make that smooth blending back into bat. And that's really complicated and surprising for kids. So and it's confusing for teachers because we see these kids and they know all of the letter names, they know all of the letter sounds, but they cannot put them together in the right order. And that's going to really mess with their spelling as well. If they can't hear the sounds in the right order, they can't put them down in the right order. People with dyslexia often have poor sight word vocabulary. Eventually, we want to be able to read words just by looking at them, not by using phonics, not by having to figure them out. It's just automatic. And if you pay attention to your own reading, you might find that you don't have to think about that word. You look at it and automatically your brain just registers and you can keep going. But people with dyslexia will have a hard time even with common words, just looking at them. They can't say, they might be able to say all the letter names, say the sounds, but keeping a quick recall is really hard. A lot of times people with dyslexia have really good comprehension when they are listening to things, but really poor when they're reading. I remember I worked with a kid in the 5th grade and he had pretty significant levels of dyslexia. He was able to come in and tell me everything that he knew about the westward expansion and people going into wagons across the country to find a better life and how difficult that was. He could tell me everything there was in really complicated, significant ways. He was very in tune with what he was learning in his social studies class in 5th grade, but he kept failing all of his tests because he couldn't read the questions and then write answers. He had amazing comprehension, but he was getting an F in his social science class because of his dyslexia. And when we see people with dyslexia, we'll find sometimes that their learning progress is poor, even when their intervention is excellent. So you are using every trick that you know, you're teaching in small groups, you're doing your systematic instruction, and it just seems like day to day the child is not learning. They try really hard, you are trying really hard as a teacher, but that learning stalls out. And that's a pretty common thing to see in dyslexia. The California Dyslexia Guidelines have a list of age-related characteristics for children across different ages that is really useful to look at if you want to know if your preschooler might have dyslexia or if it's a student that's in high school. So you can have a look at those. I really recommend that you do. And then just some additional things that you might see. I pulled these out of that list of age group characteristics, but these kind of span across age groups. People with dyslexia might have trouble pronouncing words of any kind. Just being able to put, especially when words have more than one syllable, putting together acetaminophen can be difficult when you have dyslexia. And again, that relates back to that phonological processing of not really hearing the parts of language, not knowing which words and in what order they go. People with dyslexia often have a really hard time with rapid naming. That's one of the first things that we'll see when we're diagnosing dyslexia, that even if they're shown, they know all of their colors, and you show them a picture that's a pink card, they have a hard time just quickly saying pink, blue, purple, green, pink, black, orange, black, pink. They cannot really quickly put those words together with the thing that they're looking at. And you can imagine that that makes reading really hard, because when we're reading, ultimately we are rapidly naming words and then continuing to go and do that with fluency. I've already talked about the problems that the children with dyslexia have with phoneme segmentation and blending. They have a hard time also with organization and time management and directions that just seem to get lost. They struggle with new vocabulary. That's part of the rapid naming, and figurative language is hard. So trying to get more information in, their ability with vocabulary and figurative language seems to lag behind what they understand with comprehension. And then even orally, they'll have poor word retrieval. So they can't remember to say jug. So they might just point and say that thing that you put the water in, when they really mean jug or bottle. They'll say thing or stuff. And these are all really common struggles. And then dyslexia has collateral effects on people's social emotional outlook. The older they get, the more anxious they become. That anxiety really increases as they find that they're in school and they can't keep up with their reading, or they're being asked to do things publicly that they're not quite capable of. So that anxiety, the older they get, the worse that anxiety gets. And that also results in a decrease in their self-image, where maybe when they were small and they didn't have to read yet, people thought they were smart and funny and had good vocabulary, but as they fall behind their peers in their ability to read text, their self-image decreases. And then they have this sort of, I think, functionally appropriate response, which is that they don't want to do work or try because it's hard and it's scary. And why do any of us as humans want to do things that are hard and scary? And when this refusal to work or refusal to try arises, it could look like defiance. It could look like laziness. So the kids with dyslexia, they get a bad rap, that people don't really understand why they're not doing what they're doing. And so they kind of get in trouble for being defiant or lazy or refusing, and they end up in the principal's office. Because they have these really legitimate problems with learning that come with this additional mental, emotional burden, there are things we as teachers and adults can do to support those children's resilience and helping them cultivate a growth mindset by understanding that, yes, I have dyslexia, but that just means I have to work a little bit harder and I try a little bit harder, but I can learn. That's a very important thing to help kids come to. Help them determine self-determination so that the children understand who they are. They understand what their assets are, what their skills are, so that they can set goals for themselves and work toward them, that this is something that they are in control of. It's not an external thing that's happened to them. Classroom teachers can do what they can to create a classroom environment that's safe for risk taking, where children know that trying is important and failing is no big deal. We just try. And if we fail, we fall down, we get up, and we try again. That emotional support is so important for all kids, but especially for kids with dyslexia. And finally, we want to teach literacy using evidence-based practices. And evidence-based practices involve instructional programs that are systematic. They're directly teaching phonics. They're directly practicing and explicitly practicing phonemic awareness. They're really structured, where you start a skill and then you practice it, and then the next day you return to it and you continue to spiral through that curriculum. And multisensory techniques really help people with dyslexia as well, that they're not just looking at it and writing it, but they're also saying it and hearing it, and sometimes even tapping things out or using finger gestures to help them. That is what I want to say about dyslexia for right now, and just the characteristics of it and what it is and what it isn't. Uh, it's a real thing. It's hard to diagnose, but we want to pay attention to it. We want to make sure that children who have dyslexia get the help that they deserve. Thanks.